And so, having just returned from both the meeting of the National Church Buildings Council, followed by the General Synod in York, straight back to school governance, school worship, deanery meetings, a funeral visit and of parish appointments, it is fair to say that I, of all people, understand that balancing the spiritual and the practical can be tricky business. Our full schedules are full, usually, of good stuff. Our busyness has a merit to it. I try most of the time to successfully prioritise what to put first, to shuffle at the last minute when I need to, always trying to remember the advice of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who said, "You can never be too busy to pray. The busier you are, the more you need to pray." And still, I can turn up not knowing quite which day of the week it is, as Colin will testify to this morning. The account of Martha, Mary and Jesus is all about priorities. It's all about busyness. It's all about what it means to follow Jesus. And this morning it prompts me to ask three distinct questions. Firstly, practice or prayer? Secondly, domestic or disciple? And thirdly, material or missional? So my first question, practice or prayer? Well, theologians have clashed over this account of Mary, Martha and Jesus for all sorts of reasons. And some have argued that the busyness of church life can be attributed to Martha and somehow be seen lesser, while the attention of Mary to Christ is attributed to the contemplative Christian life, to the monasteries and the convents, and favoured by God. So what is the answer? Is it practice, the practical, the busyness, or is it prayer? Well, as vicar and area dean with a busy life, it would be easy for me to stand here in the pulpit and preach to you, Mary. But my friends, my heart is still with Martha, for I recognise her in me. The practicality of ministry and church, and all the things that must be thought about, discussed and indeed done, simply cannot be avoided. But Jesus doesn't scold Martha. His rebuke is soft. In fact, he starts with a loving term. He says, "Martha, Martha." He's not saying what she's doing is not good. He's simply remarking that Mary taking time to pause and sit at his feet is better. I am a practical person and I like being busy. But that busyness has to come from a place of stillness, a place of prayer, a place of worship. That's why the Church of England requires of its clergy to say morning and evening prayer daily. That's why even in the most practical of meetings I start in prayer. It doesn't matter if we're talking about account balances or gutters and downpipes. We begin in prayer. Martha is not trying just to serve Jesus with all of her being, which she is. But she's doing it out of a place of emptiness, it seems. Just focusing on the practical. And however good the practical is, it's not enough on its own. It's Mary who teaches us to stop, to sit at Jesus' feet and listen to him. And so the second question was domestic or disciple? Well, over the years a lot's been made of this passage, considering the role of women in the church and the life of faith. The truth of the passage is that what is said to Martha about Mary would be just as true if these were two men or even two children. The fact that this account is about a rabbi spending time with two women, however, would have been shocking in its time. And it shows again God's love through Jesus for the marginalised, constantly reinforcing that each and every one of us are called. We are equal. We are all made in his image. Whatever our differences in gender, in race, in sexuality. It might be said that Mary plays a more Martha, plays a more female stereotype in the kitchen. And Mary, not so much so, less so as a disciple. But the reality is, this isn't really about that at all. It's about what it means to follow Jesus. The truth of this passage again is that Martha is not told off for cooking. She's doing a great service. Jesus is the honoured guest. And Martha wants to do something really, really special for him. And I can just imagine the kitchen full of dishes. Jesus is coming. What would you do if Jesus was coming? And there she is. Just think MasterChef. Yeah? And for a starter, Martha is preparing a deconstructed prawn cocktail with a Mary Rose jus. But she hasn't got Greg, and she hasn't got John, and she hasn't even got Mary, because she sat at Jesus' feet, listening to the teacher. Martha thinks she is in charge of the meal, but I think she's made it so complicated that the meal is in charge of her, and she can't see Jesus in the midst. Martha is not just trying to honour her guests with all she has in her larder. She's doing it without realising who it is that she's serving. Mary teaches us to stop and to sit at Jesus' feet and focus upon him. And so my third question is the material or the missional. Martha is cooking a meal. Now we know that Jesus does meals. It might be loaves and fishes from a poor boy's packed lunch. It might be eating with tax collectors and being condemned by everybody around for doing so. It might even be cooking fish for breakfast on the beach. We know Jesus does meals. So why is there a problem with Martha? Well, actually, if you look at Jesus' meals, they're all communal. And they're not about the preparation. They're about the eating. They're about the conversation. They're about the company. And Martha gets so lost in the preparation that she forgets what she's preparing for. But the reality is the material is very necessary. Just look a couple of weeks back at our 150th celebration of the opening of this parish church. It was full of practical stuff, done by many, many people. And yet also, because of that, it was profoundly missional, because it came out of 150 years of mission to this community, looking to what comes next. Mary, in our account, stops what she is doing to attend to her Lord. Her activity is directed by him, rather than what she thinks he wants. Whereas Martha carries on being distracted by the practical, distracted by the need of the moment. Jesus says to Martha what he says to us all. You are anxious and you are troubled about many things, but only one thing is needed. I love to think Jesus might be joking, and one particular commentator suggests that Jesus is almost saying to Martha, we only need a few dishes, Martha. Mary thinks we only need one. We come in a few moments to the other meal that Jesus shared, of course. We come to our meal of Holy Communion. We come to meet Jesus Christ himself in bread and in wine. The meal that Jesus gave us, we will come in silence and contemplation. And I beg you all, as we have heard of Mary sitting at Jesus' feet, to encompass your inner Mary this morning. So after you have received your communion, go back to your seat in a place of quiet. Don't be tempted to chat with your neighbour, or that is to enter back into the busyness. Sit at Jesus' feet for a while longer, in the quiet, until you hear them say the post-communion prayer. I ask three questions. Firstly, is it practice or prayer? Secondly, is it domestic or disciple? Thirdly, is it material or missional? And the ultimate question is it Martha or is it Mary? Well, the answer to that is no, it's Jesus. There is not a wrong answer to Martha or Mary. There is simply a balance. A Martha and a Mary in all of us. I identify more with Martha, and she challenges me. And I need to find my inner Mary from time to time to keep me right. Don't we all? There are some others that will identify more with Mary, who also need to learn from Martha that there is always a need to get her hands dirty and to be involved. For that is how the business of the gospel is done. Mary, Martha, you know who you are. Embrace who you are in God, who you are called to be. Journey where he wants to take you. Always praying that he will work in us to transform those around us. If we are truly going to continue the mission set before Christ, the mission of these 150 years moving on into the future, then we will need all of our Marthas and all of our Marys, but above all, our Lord Jesus